forgot to put my earphones on. I'm kind of anxious to get this started today because there's a lot going on in Stag Hammer. If you haven't seen the first video, I would recommend strongly that you go do that. You go watch that first one, and the first one has a time. I'm going to try to alter the overall length of these hour-long things so we can keep track of which is which. The first one is 1 hour and 5 seconds. And the first one, I didn't have a shirt on. And my aunt this morning says at least I should put on a Hawaiian lei. And so I thought I probably should put a shirt on. So I've done that. Now let's go ahead and get started. Mac had come up with his Scion and his personal stuff. He's going to move in to his house, his brand new overnight occupation of his house. He was going to put all of his personal effects and get actually moved in. Very, very minimal, but he's going to get moved in. He's up on top of the mountain, looking to see what's going on in the valley, and he could see in front of him some significant changes in the terrain. It was a lot of vehicular traffic, it looked like, overnight, which may or may not have had something to do with the lights and the activity that pulled Sharon out of his bed and rushed out to the northwest for her alert. So he was driving out to Stag Hammer, and he's up on top of the mountain, but he's looking at the terrain. And he had noticed a guy that from a distance looks like he was looking at him. Crazy business. But he looked farther out toward the west, and he could see that there appeared to be a significant water source coming out somewhere behind a grove of trees at the extreme west end, and the streams numbered 4. And they kind of wandered here and there, and he thought actually that it looked random, but it also gave him the thought that, well, it's not random after all. It looks like it's part of a construct. Since everything looked sort of planned, even though it looked random. But I followed the creeks east down the valley floor, and the 4 creeks disappeared near the east end of Stag Hammer, the valley. He thought it looked like some science fiction artificial construct. Everything planned, nothing basically out of place. He thought he should have brought out a good camera to take some panoramic views of what he saw. But then he thought, Well, he's going to be up there again probably quite a few times. So he didn't know who he was going to show those to. So he said, it doesn't even have a girlfriend out here. Well, one thing I left out last night is that when the transaction was going on, Sharon handed him a pouch that had keys and stuff, and she says the pouch includes the keypad numbers and my phone number in case you want a date. He kind of laughed, but later on he's up on top of this mountain, and he figures that maybe he did have a girlfriend after all. Sharon was really good looking, so she did give him her phone number. And he was his mind was sort of wandering, and he was wondering, why in the world is he even here in Middletown, Arkansas? A sudden compulsion in the middle of the night drove him to drive that pen into the map straight into the heart of Middletown, Arkansas. He got back in the car and he started the engine, and he was musing about his surroundings, and satisfied he was ready to move along, he engaged the transmission and drove away down the inside of home. And he thought, where did that come from? Inside of home. What in the world does that mean? He got to the farm gate, and he pulled up to the gate post and opened the little door where the keypad was. He entered the code. When the gate opened, he was startled to hear Mark say, "We expected you sooner. Come on in. We have fresh cookies and excellent coffee waiting." He replied, "Hey, good morning, Mark. Thanks, and I'll be right there." He drove up to the house, parked off in the grass. He walked up the path and looked up as the door opened, and he saw a new face. A young girl of perhaps 10 with a fresh look like another one of those milkmaids, and she reminded me of Sharon. And as I walked up, this girl gave me a broad smile, displayed perfect teeth, a rosy complexion and clear eyes, and a pleasing demeanor. It almost seemed required for me to offer her a hug, so I just simply walked up to her, folded her into my arms. She responded and wrapped her arms around me, around my chest, because that's all the farther up she was vertically. I pulled back and kissed her on the cheek, and she giggled brightly. I said, "This is the way we greet strangers from where I come from." She giggled again, grabbed my hand. I asked, "What do they call you around here?" She replied, "They call me Pinky." I continued my questioning. "Who do you belong to?" She grinned and said she would just give me one guess. I stepped back while holding on to her hand. Now at the end of two outstretched arms, I could see a little more detail. I studied her face, and I said, "Oh, of course, no doubt about it. You're that singer I went to the Coliseum to see last week." Pinky laughed out loud and doubled up laughing and giggling. Look, Pinky, it's obvious you are either Sharon's daughter or her sister. Which is it? Pinky had pulled out a hanky and wiped her eyes from the laughing. She came back and put her arms back around me. She said that her mom had told her about her and your date last night, the dinner date. She said she told her that we both had a really good visit and she expected that she might have more. And I told Pinky that I would be sure to include her on the majority of our dates if we did have any. I told her that I really did enjoy our night out. I also told her I thought she really looked like her mom, which when I said that, Pinky seemed to sparkle. Pinky released me and, having grabbed my hand again, led me into the house and on into the kitchen. Gracie and Mark were there already while Shelley was standing by the sink with a glass of milk. Pinky blurted out that he already knows who I am. Everybody in the room started clapping and cheering as Gracie hugged her from behind. It was like old home week, as everybody seemed to adore her. I was not surprised. Now you know who Pinky is. Or do you? We got around the table, and the talk around the table was spirited and light, mostly just general talk. And it did seem that since the people here really looked like they belonged, I took advantage of a lull in the talk to clear my throat. The ones at the table seemed to defer to me, so I sat up straight. Everyone turned to look at me. I was still curious. I turned to Pinky and said I still have some questions. Ask her, why are you here? She sort of turned a little rosy shade of pink and looked down at her lap. Mark started to talk, saying, I think I should explain the situation here with this household and bring you up to speed. I said, please do. Mark told me, and the ones listening who knew this already but still listened attentively, that there were 3 families here on the farm. He said that it was certainly my prerogative to change the situation in a wholesale manner, but that he hoped he could explain things to my satisfaction so there would be no actual disruption with my now factual ownership of the property. He said that he and Gracie occupied number 3, Sharon and Pinky occupied number 2, and Shelley had opted to live in the big house in what was called the attic. The attic was on the 3rd floor and was indeed the attic of the main house. It had been completed years ago and was more than 1,300 square feet. It had a very large bathroom. Even had a small kitchen. Light cooking, and while that was rarely used, it was Shelley's to use. Shelley was of age and had decided to sort of live on her own, even though Gracie and Mark were her parents. Shelley acted as the housekeeper for the main house, while the occupants of number 2 and number 3 were responsible for them. Mark continued, saying that the firm was paying rent on the 3 portions of the property and all the bills due to the consumables. Electricity and gas and telephone network between the buildings and off-site. He said that he and Gracie, Shelley, and Sharon were employees of the firm and were paid by them directly. As such, there may be times that their presence is required off-site. We kind of went over that already. He said that for the time being, their duties at the firm and certain qualities and activities of the farm were to remain confidential. He said if it became a matter of conflict, that the firm could actually take control of the farm, but that it had never happened and was not expected to happen. I thought that was interesting, but not unexpected. He said that the firm also paid for any and all grocery bills, and that Gracie was the cook for the property. He told us that therefore all meals were provided by the firm. It was the responsibility of the people here to let Gracie know when they would be present and when they were going to be absent. Sundays were the cook's days off, but it turned out that Gracie and Mark were almost always available and working. All the people here, it turned out, were mostly here in the kitchen, unless there was travel involved or if they were in their own homes, including the attic. I asked if I could get a tour of the attic, and Shelley said certainly. She offered to escort me there when our conference here was finished. Mark said that he was responsible for all the outside spaces and that he hired short-term help with the farm chores when they came up. He said there were tractors and devices dedicated to haying for farms around the valley that were dairy-oriented, which didn't have the acreage for silage to feed the cattle. This was income, and went into the farm account to pay for taxes and insurance and the like. He said this account was comfortably able to pay all the bills for supplies and short-term rent of implements and farm help. He also said that if I had any doubts at all, that this was a working farm, and it earned its keep and was expected to do so. He again reiterated that he wished for me to continue with the status quo, with him as the overall farm manager, and to keep intact all the rental agreements. I told the group assembled that I was happy to keep each and every agreement in place. I said I had no reservations doing so. Shelley and I left the table and moved to the center stairs. We climbed to the second floor and walked along to the end of the main hallway, and then around a 45-degree turn, finally came to a wide closed door. Shelley twisted the lever on one of the two doors and latched it back against the outside hall. She said the doors were never locked, but I would find she had a working knowledge of kung fu if I ever found myself sleepwalking in the middle of the night. I laughed out loud as she giggled at her joke. We were in a sort of foyer with a wide varnished mahogany staircase stretching back to the right and up to the attic, which was one large room. A delightful place with dormer windows supplying lots of light all around. The north end showed a door which I was told concealed the bath and shower, and incidentally even a set of appliances with a washer and dryer. Shelley proudly showed me everything, and it was all spotless. On that north end of the wall, the north end wall at the side, was another door, which, when I asked what it led to, was informed that it led to spaces which were off limits. Shelley told me there was an outside door on the first floor that led up to this space as well. She said there appeared to be some equipment installed there that monitored conditions inside and outside the main building. She also intimated